You are listening to Browns Bites, where the Cleveland Browns have just won the biggest upset of the season, perhaps, defeating the San Francisco 49ers 1917. I believe this would be the biggest victory in Kevin Stefanski's career in the regular season. The only one that would, trump it would be the Steelers win. And what makes that interesting to me is that both were under similar circumstances. I think a lot of people forget just how unlikely the win against the Steelers was, with all the players there missing due to COVID. Coincidentally, Joel Bitonio missed that game as well. But there were a number of players. I think Denzel Ward was at that game. Obviously, Kevin Stefanski himself was out that game. But most people were sort of just forfeit the game, forget it. It's not going to happen. All these other things, and the Browns go out and not just win, but they scored 28 the first quarter. The Steelers and ultimately win that game. Similar circumstances here. Missing a ton of players. There was a feeling of just get through this and survive, and the Browns win. So, I mean, huge win, huge momentum swing. I think we'll get into it, but changes a lot of, I think, the ideas of what has been going on with this team. But where are you at, Brie?
Well, first I would say it was such a weird week overall. And obviously coming off of the bye week and the Deshaun Watson injury. And I think just a lot of people running with a lot of different narratives, different conspiracy theories thrown out there. I just didn't quite know what we were going to get from this Browns team, to be honest, because it felt like everything was setting up for a disaster, if you will. The San Francisco 49ers were obviously coming off of a dominant victory against the Cowboys. They looked almost like an unbeatable team in some fashion.
Terrifying.
Really good football team, very well-rounded. And obviously with the Browns coming in and starting PJ Walker, that was confirmed and announced that was Friday, right? That did not give me a ton of confidence that this team had a shot to win the game, just based on the fact that, I have confidence. I had confidence in the defense. However, I didn't want to have to heavily rely on only the defense to be able to win this game, because you're setting yourself up for them to get overtired, to, like the 49ers are a good football team. They're not going to just give it away. And so my expectations were very low coming into this, just very low. I really didn't have any. And I really just expected to chalk this up as a loss, as terrible as that sounds. And, if they somehow were going to be able to pull it off, I'd be happy with it. So as the game kicked off, Pete, and you start out on a defensive drive with 3 penalties, I was like, oh gosh, here we go. Coming out of a bye week, looking sloppy, the 49ers, score, make it look easy. I was really setting myself up for disappointment, really, to just say this might be a game I turn off at halftime. And, after that scoring drive, the defense really kind of settled in. And I started to think okay, after the first quarter, I was like, hey, I'm pretty happy with this, all things considering. It was a really weird game in terms of penalties and referees and all of it. But, Pete, I'm happy. You stole a win. You stole a victory that looked like it was going to be taken from you again. And I have no complaints. If you want to complain, fine, but I don't have any tonight.
So pre-game, there's a scuffle, we'll call it, a little kerfuffle in the middle of the field between the Browns and 49ers players.
What was happening there? I actually didn't catch that. Pete, I have to admit, I'm embarrassed. No, I'm not embarrassed. I own this stuff. I spent my entire morning analyzing every angle and video of Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift last night. So my pregame Browns, I did not turn it on until 15 minutes until they kicked off. So I was distracted.
I appreciate the honesty. I'm going to try my best not to judge you. You already admitted this to me, but no, look, I don't know what sort of started it, but for whatever reason, there was some pushing and shoving. I noticed it was mostly defensive players on the Browns shoving the 49ers players. I sort of saw one, PJ Walker and Dorian Thompson-Robinson warming up behind, just watching, and then the running backs sort of show up late. And I was thinking, yeah, that's probably a good call. You guys probably don't want to get in there.
So the Browns started it, is what you're saying?
I don't know what did it. And nobody's sort of fessing up. But what I do know is, at the very least, I thought the Browns were going to come out fired up, which I think was a reasonable fear given the circumstances. They had the bye week, they had all these things going on, and you're sitting there going, okay, they've got a shot to do something against the 49ers. Then Deshaun Watson shut down. And then you're like Joel Bitonio shut down. And then there's questions about both Ethan Posick and David Njoku. David Njoku and Posick both play, but you're sitting there going, this is an easy game where you could see them sort of be like, all right, here we go. And that ensured to me that they were at least going to come out inspired. Now, having said that, the 49ers went right down the field. With the help of several Browns penalties, which looked bad, they went down the field in like 5 plays. It was like 7-0 with like 12 and a half minutes left in the game. And you're sitting there going, okay, this is going to be even worse than I thought. But like you said, they settled down. I thought the offense, obviously the first drive did not go well. They did have a couple nice plays, and then PJ Walker throws that pick, and you're like, oh man, this is really going to get bad in a hurry. Not unlike the Steelers game where you're sitting there going, oh, geez. The 49ers did not get any points out of that. They were held to a field goal attempt that they missed, and you're like, okay, let's see what happens. And then over the course of the game, I think in some ways just by effort, some ways just their execution was better. I think we saw evidence that they took advantage of the bye week, and they started making you believe. And it wasn't even that you were going to believe that they were going to win, but you just felt good about what you were seeing from the team, even if they were losing. In some ways, my initial thought with this is like watching the University of Akron play, well, anyone. You're like, they tried hard. I feel good about their trying hard, even though I know what's going to happen inevitably. But they kept going with it, and I was really happy to see some of the things change that we saw change. Like, for example, they changed their running game in the ways that I was kind of hoping they'd change. They did things that like catered to the offensive line, the talent that they have, the backs that they have. They didn't try to run outside zone. They went inside zone. They ran counter. They ran regular, good old fashioned toss sweeps and stuff where you're like, maybe it won't work, but I can at least appreciate where this thing's going. And against this 49ers team, we may not see a whole lot of evidence that it's going in the right direction, but I can at least appreciate it. Same thing with some of the plays PJ Walker was throwing initially. You had some nice, easy play action things that were just off of the concepts that they were doing. And you're like, and my thought was, I can easily see Deshaun Watson doing some of these things and succeeding with it. I felt good about that. So that stuff made me feel pretty good initially, even if I wasn't convinced that it was going to lead to where it ultimately ended up.
Yeah, the one thing that I found incredibly frustrating, which seems to just be the thorn in my side of watching this team, regardless of when or who they play, it does feel like it is a constant of like when they do things right, it's constantly nullified by a penalty. And there were some big ones today, particularly on offense. I know that there were some pretty meaningful penalties on the defense today as well, especially down the stretch. But from an offensive perspective, with having PJ Walker as your starter, you needed to be clean, if nothing else, because it wasn't going to be easy. And the 49ers defense is really good too. So it's not only that it's not that I lacked complete faith in the Browns offense. It's that you were starting a third string quarterback technically against a really solid 49ers defense. And so in order to give that offense a chance, you can't shoot yourself in the foot. And that just continues to happen time and time again. And the one that sticks out, obviously, that I think everybody was extremely frustrated by was the David Njoku, what would have been a touchdown that was it David Njoku in the first one?
Yeah, they did it. They set it up twice beautifully, and both were nullified by penalty.
Yeah. Okay.
First one was Wyatt Teller.
Yeah, so Wyatt Teller, what was interesting about that, though, is they panned to Jed Wills, who was extremely upset and looked like he was arguing in defense of himself about the penalty. And so I'm sitting there thinking, like, oh my gosh, is Jed's headspace right now is like he knows he's not playing the best. And then him thinking that this penalty, and maybe he knew that it was going to be on Wyatt and he was still really upset about it. But I immediately went to like his emotion and reaction to that was, I mean, how can you say he doesn't care? Because,
Sure.
He was pretty upset about the whole thing. And to be fair, it feels like Wyatt Teller is constantly in this position.
Yes, it does.
I know everyone has been really, really harsh on Jed Wills, but Wyatt Teller deserves some criticism because it feels like anytime there is a big chunk play that the offense is getting, Wyatt Teller is getting a hold called and you're erasing it completely.
Agreed. And that particular play, he was just in awful position and allowed that guy inside.
Oh, it was so frustrating.
Yeah, a lot of people jumped on Jedrick Wills right up his ass as soon as he was complaining. I think he was just pissed that they called the penalty. I think it was just I'm not going to say it wasn't possible. He was pissed that he thinking it was on him. I think it was more of we did everything right and we got it called back. But what I will say in defense of Jedrick Wills, because there's another play to Njoku in the fourth quarter where he gets called for a penalty, and it is a penalty on him. People hate him to the point where it's just irrational. I'm betting, just on initial viewing, this is the best game Jedrick Wills has played all season. And you will look at that penalty and you'll go, that's bad. And I'm not going to tell you it wasn't. There's a certain element of, he can't see out the back of his head, so it's hard to tell, but there's a technical flaw in that play. Nevertheless, like Jedrick Wills, there are people who are ready to say Jedrick Wills is the reason they lost this game, had they lost this game. Jedrick Wills did not make Wyatt Teller hold on that play to take points off the board. He did not cause Dustin Hopkins to miss the field goal he missed, which could have been critical. And he did not make PJ Walker throw a terrible interception right after that play. Jedrick Wills played well enough against a very, very good 49ers team to win. And I'm not suggesting he's the answer. I don't think he's going to be on this team next year. But I don't suspect the Browns are going to get rid of him either. I know there's speculation that they're going to try that they've looked around for a veteran. The ideas that have been thrown out there are preposterous to me. The fact of the matter is that there's a whole lot of angles to this. Let's start here. The guy most people want is Garrett Bolles, the left tackle of the Denver Broncos, who's a perfectly fine offensive tackle. Problem one, the Denver Broncos would have to be willing to get rid of a starting left tackle, and they don't have to do it. And they're going to charge you a premium to do it. And they're certainly not going to be just like, oh, yeah, we'll just take Jedrick Wills. You can have our good tackle and make it work. Problem two, he makes, even if you take away the 6 game checks worth of money, it's something like, off the top of my head, over $10 million, like $9 to $10 million still left on his salary, which is money you cannot use next year. The other part of that problem is Jedrick Wills' $6.2 million he's making this year is almost all bonus. So you eat all of that. So you are now compounding that into about $13 million plus the money you've already paid Jedrick Wills on his normal salary. You're not getting any of that. You now would have Garrett Bolles on a premium contract, Joel Bitonio on a premium contract, Ethan Posick on a pretty hefty contract, Wyatt Teller on a premium contract, and Jack Conklin on a premium contract. That's not realistic remotely. And to do so in a season where you're sort of throwing a temper tantrum about, well, we need to sort of save this season or whatever, when you're not really in a bad place, it doesn't make any sense. Problem three, Garrett Bolles is going to be 32 next year. That's not old necessarily, but here's what you don't want to have happen. You don't want to end up in a situation where you have an aging offensive line, and Joel Bitonio's well over his 30s, well into his 30s. Jack Conklin's creeping up. It's not like the Browns would have an old line by any stretch, but it's one of those things where if you look through history, you sort of see where teams that kept together an offensive line for a really long time, and all of a sudden they drop off a cliff because they're all older, and you don't want to end up in that situation. So I suspect if the Browns are really trying to trade for somebody, it's somebody in the perfect guy to get, and they're not going to get him, but I'm just using this as an example, is Chris Hubbard, who is somebody the Browns obviously had and was very good for the Browns in that 6-man role. He's currently starting at right tackle for the Tennessee Titans. They have another guy there, but they haven't put him in. But that's the type of guy. He doesn't cost a lot of money, but he's a professional offensive tackle. Now, Chris Hubbard is not going to save this line. And the other problem is I'm not sure Garrett Bolles would save this line either. Now, granted, today is a very good step. The Browns got better offensive line play, but it's a group that has not played well overall. And when I say Jedrick Wills probably had his best game overall, I would say the Browns offensive line had their best game overall since maybe the Bengals game when they had Nick Chubb, but this is the best game post Chubb injury. So if you're expecting Garrett Bowles to sort of come in and fix everything and all those other things I'm talking about, I think you're lying to yourself. What I would say is the assets you would have to use to give up Garrett Bowles, which I'm guessing would be around that second round pick, the best pick they have in this upcoming draft, in the 2024 draft, which is loaded. And, everybody says that, but people who have paid attention to me have listened to me tell you the last two drafts, not great. This draft is very, very good. There are very, very talented players who are being listed as third round picks because there's just so many guys. And part of the reason that talent is so deep is offensive tackle. What I suspect the Browns will do, one, they're not going to get rid of Jack Conklin. I don't see it happening. Two, they have DeJuan Jones, and we should be very, very grateful we have DeJuan Jones. He is a shitty run blocker. I can't stand watching him do it, but he can get better. But he's a professional level pass protector. He had one bad snap today. He blocked the shit out of Nick Bosa. People tell me how great Nick Bosa is. Wasn't around much in this game because DeJuan freaking 21-year-old Jones shut him down for the most part, which is insane to me. So what I suspect will happen, my way too early prediction for this is Jedrick Wills is going to get traded in the offseason. And somebody's going to say, well, nobody's going to want his guaranteed contract. Well, they may have to eat some of that money, but there are always teams who are way below the salary floor who are willing to bet on somebody that young at that position. And again, Jedrick Wills is really talented. There are questions I have with him. There are things I can speculate on that I'm not going to do here. But there are people who look at his body and go, yes, we can make it work. There are a lot of offensive lines who are desperate for bodies. So I suspect they actually can move him pretty easily in the offseason. They should draft somebody, even if it's with that second round pick. At that point, you have Jack Conklin, DeJuan Jones, and another tackle all under contract. You have youth, which is exactly what you want. DeJuan Jones, young, second round pick or third round pick, whatever. Another young player in there who's now potentially developing behind the guy, which is the other situation you want. You don't want to have to expect your rookie tackle to come in and start. What does this allow you to do? One, you take advantage of talent in a good draft class, hopefully. You help balance out your own budget in terms of your spending on the offensive line, critical component of what the Browns need to do to continue to be able to add pieces, to continue to build this roster the way they want to, and potentially keep guys. The thing I'm keeping an eye on with this is Grant Delpit. Right now, 5 games into this season, coming into the season, I think there was a little bit of a conversation. Well, it's probably either going to be DPJ or Grant Delpit to get us extended. Right now, it's no contest. Right now, you are looking at Grant Delpit and going, I have to have him on my team. And for all the, you can get all the reasons it's irrational and there's compelling arguments for it. But the thing I would point out is, in addition to the fact he's having a phenomenal season so far, he's also young. You drafted him, and don't underestimate that part of however irrational you want to say it is to pay a guy like Grant Delpit. There's always that little element of he's our guy. We want to reward our guys. We want to send the message to our team that we reward our guys. And I think that's another part of that. So ultimately, if you're asking me, do I want Garrett Bowles and no draft pick, whatever draft pick that would be, or do I want a rookie tackle next year, Grant Delpit extended next year, and more cap space to use other places? I'm taking the latter every single time. I apologize for talking so long, but I've been waiting to get that one out.
I was going to say, we're already having some off-season talks right now after that big San Francisco victory.
Well, listen, you're of the same mindset. Long-term planning here. We got to think about where this thing's going. We can't just
Pete, right now I want to live in the moment because we don't get too many. We don't get too many.
Well, anyway, my short-term thing was we people just make it a habit to just beat the crap out of Jedrick Wills. And I think he actually played pretty reasonably well against an opponent where I thought he was going to get absolutely destroyed.
Well, and like I said, too, if the Browns lose that game, the conversations and the overall attitude of the fan base is very different. Because, again, I don't think a lot of us had expectations going into it. But because the Browns made it a close game the entire 4 quarters, and the fact that they were leading at the very end and all they had to do was make a defensive stop, you got to a point where everything shifted. And if they lose that game, it was almost setting us up for even bigger disappointment because none of us were expecting to be there.
Yeah, I think if we skip ahead and you just say, if you're playing against the undefeated San Francisco 49ers, and you set, what 1 minute 45 seconds on the clock with a couple timeouts, and you say your defense has to make one stop to win the game. Are you going to take that scenario? Everyone is saying 100% yes.
Yeah.
And if they make that kick, they failed. And it's a shame because like the first couple plays, they were right on everything. And then obviously Martin Emerson gets that penalty, but like that would have been a huge letdown from that to say, this is exactly the scenario we would have wanted, dreamed of in this game, and then to have it fall apart. Now we get back to the offense. We get to the Njoku touchdown that wasn't. We get to the other tight end screen that wasn't.
Yep.
We get to some of those other plays, and you're sitting there very frustrated. Now, the one thing that like was an absolute baller play call was the setup, Harrison Bryant under center, tossed into Kareem Hunt, which I cannot believe how slow he is. But it was so wide open. It was so wide open for 60 yards. It was easy. And they just absolutely dialed that up in a clutch situation, made a huge play. Like, I don't think, you're having a chance to catch your breath. Like, that was a monster play call in that scenario, and they absolutely nailed it. The funny thing is the entire game, because Kareem Hunt, I will give him credit, made some very tough runs in this game. Like, he ran hard, ran behind his pads, and did some good things. But like when the Browns signed him, all I could think of is Mary Kay Cabot going, well, he lost 10 pounds. He's got to be faster and more agile than before. And I'm sitting there watching the game, and I'm saying, how the hell did he lose 10 pounds of speed? Because he looks even slower.
Poor Kareem. He battled.
Brutal. But he fell forward on all of his carries, which is critical.
Yeah. I'll listen. I'll take it, especially again, I listened to a little bit of the post game, and it's so funny how everyone still is finding things to complain about. And like the run game was still one of them, even though like if you look at the box score, like pretty solid. I mean, when you think about it, I know that a lot of those big runs came at the end of the game, but like they still happened. And that's what you need. That's what you need from this team. It was something that was desperately needed in this game specifically, like to have that balance and to not have to rely on PJ Walker to win with his arm, because that's just a gamble that you didn't want to take, especially the fact that he had thrown an interception. He would eventually throw 2 interceptions, and like knowing the position that the Browns were in, being able to rely on Jerome and Kareem to be able to make plays and extend drives, like that was critical.
It is my desperate hope that we just watch Jerome Ford grow up, because
I hope so. I mean, I was panicked. All I was thinking was like ball security. Please don't.
Well, that was certainly part of it. But for the first part of the game, I just kept watching him stop and pitter patter and hesitate. Yeah. And like on that one carry where he goes outside and he like has a corner in front of him, and he sidesteps, and you're just like, no. And they end up losing 5 yards on that play because he tried to. And I'm just watching him, and you go, you're 215 pounds, dude. Like, go get behind your pads and find what you can find. And like, it was bad for a lot of that game. And then the second half, like they started running that toss to the boundary, and he started doing it, and he started getting behind his pads. He started running through tackles. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, he's not really doing this inside, but he's doing it at least on the outside. And then as soon as he gets another one of those tosses the field goal drive, he gets that toss to the outside, and they go right back inside, and he goes right behind his pads again and just starts driving through. I think some of that is his vision, certainly, but the Browns aren't asking him to do much in terms of like decision making. They're not asking him to make pick holes so much. I think some of it was just trusting himself to just go and figure it out as he went. And he didn't have to make guys miss. He just had to go and drive his leg, because he's really strong. Like that's one of the things he did really well at the University of Cincinnati, was because he was drafted with a lot of the same characteristics as Kareem Hunt was coming out of Toledo. He just gets in the end zone near the goal line. Like that was a big thing for him. So he just started doing that. And like, I'm hoping that when they go and watch film or whatever, he's going to sit there and watch himself. And whether it's Stump Mitchell or whatever coach is looking at it, or just himself, and he watches himself sort of hesitating earlier in the game and not getting anywhere to where he's just running behind him, getting behind his pads and going, he sees the difference. Because if he does that, I think we're going to start to see improvement. That doesn't mean he's going to be a great back, but like this was a big deal for him. And I was really happy to see him do those things.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. So Pete, I do want to just maybe run through our text message thread. During I don't know if any of our listeners are curious, like what our like in-game text messaging looks like. So I just wanted to run everyone through very quickly. First, I will say I did admit to Pete at 12:19 that I was just letting him know that Taylor and Travis were out holding hands last night and the Browns weren't going to ruin my day either way. I did backtrack on that because I believe at one point after they got the interception and then the offense proceeds to like go negative yards, yeah. I was then mad. So I broke my promise. But anyway, the first text I got from Pete came at 1:40 and it said, "I'm kind of inspired by this effort." That's how low my expectations were.
True. I was like happy with what I was watching.
I literally laughed out loud. Then I got a text. I got to find the timestamp here at 2:11 and it just said "things!" exclamation point.
Yeah. They were doing things. Things were going.
And I said showing some fight. So we were like at this point we were in our like cheerleader mode. You know, we were hyping up our team. Then it took until 2:54. I texted Pete and said Amari Cooper is a dude.
Yeah, Pete I think that was right after he went up and got that ball.
Yeah, where it looked like he was. Was it
the
58-yard
one? Either way, he had another game where he's just absolutely incredible.
I just love him. Okay, then this was post halftime. I said I was just getting ready to angrily text you about a 3 and out. So that was the Amari Cooper. He jumped up and grabbed it because it was, I think, 3rd and 10.
Yeah, it was the start. That was the first drive of the second half.
Yeah, yes.
Because you were ready to get pissed that we had at least a situation where the Browns were in the game and then to come out and go flat would have been.
Yes. I was going to be very, very mad about that fact specifically, that they get the ball out of halftime and they go 3 and out. So Amari Cooper saved me. Okay, so then Pete texts me and says, "This is like the Ravens with Tyrod Taylor last week. Believe you talked about that on the podcast. We'll see if they can dig it out." Then I said, "Take the opportunity and go capitalize." Rah, rah. That was me. Then I text and say, "Can we please stop with Elijah and jet sweeps? Maybe Goodwin." So, okay, let me back up a minute. That Marquise Goodwin first series of the game, they did the little end around with him.
Yes.
Like more of that, please. I mean, Marquise Goodwin is a guy that I told you I continue to bet a touchdown in a game so that I can win some money. It's not going to happen. I haven't actually bet it I didn't bet it this game. I feel like his usage is barely there. Like
they're trying. They're looking at. Okay. He got one reception where he was weirdly short of the sticks for no good reason. But yeah, they keep trying to set up shots for him, and they've either missed them or they haven't been able to get the ball out. Part of that is pass protection. They haven't been able to trust it long enough. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we've talked about, I think going into the bye week is like all these things we want to see them sort of build out. Like it starts with the running game.
Yeah.
Which we saw some growth there. It starts with doing some things that make more sense. You mentioned Elijah Moore. I think the usage of him made a hell of a lot more sense in this game.
Agreed.
And this was what frustrated the hell out of me was when PJ Walker missed him wide at
twice.
Open. Yes, in the middle of the field on what was the
game-winning drive.
The game-winning drive to then say, they got bailed out by the penalty. But like I have been waiting for Elijah Moore to get his opportunity to make that monster play, and that was it. He was wide open. Well,
I mean, and that's exactly what I wanted to see too, is I want to see Elijah Moore with the ball in his hands and being open in space. He was in space. I mean, it was the first down plus some, and then who knows what would have happened after that. So I'm just going to chalk that up to PJ Walker. Obviously, he did a lot of off balance throws, throwing across his body a lot in this game. And my hope is that when Deshaun gets back, that we see more of that connection with Elijah Moore and him being utilized that way.
Absolutely. Now, to your point, yes, the jet sweeps are tired. I'm exhausted. Now, the thing I keep holding out for is they've done this so many times. I keep waiting for the thing that comes off the jet sweep. That's a play action shot down the field or something. They've done this so many times that I keep expecting there's going to come an opponent that's bit so I thought it was going to be them this game that they were
That
setting
bites on
up
it.
a shot or something other side of the field, whatever, and it just hasn't happened yet. But I'm with a lot of people on that. I'm tired of seeing just a straight jet sweep. Now, the one thing I will say is funny to me is like this is not a Browns problem. Everyone was trying to establish the respective jet sweeps for their team, and it's like really having a tough time with it. So yes, I thought we saw a step forward in terms of Elijah Moore getting used in ways that made a lot more sense. I think he had a bigger impact on the game overall, but in part because of PJ Walker, well, large part. Granted, the pockets were condensed and it wasn't easy, but there were plays where you're sitting there going, "Oh man, that was the opportunity for Elijah Moore to make his big contribution in this game." It could have set up the game winner or potentially scored it. Either way, that was certainly something to be happy with. But yes, you had talked about before, we come out of the Ravens game and everybody's frustrated. You're sitting there going, why can't we have this type of game where somebody comes in and they just grind it out? Like Tyrod Taylor has done. The Steelers have obviously done this with quarterbacks, and including their starter, who kind of looks like PJ Walker at times. I'm just kidding.
Throwing strays.
Only slightly. Anyway, that you did have a game where PJ Walker was not good. Now, he made a couple of nice throws, but he was not good.
Yeah.
And yet the Browns just grinded it out and made it happen. So I was really happy with some of those things. But obviously, these are all things where I think you can get more. Obviously, they mentioned on the telecast, and I can sort of relate to this. They've got to find and continue to drop ways to create touches for David Njoku.
Yes.
This was a game where they were there. Penalties got in the way, but you still want to see it. It's not always easy to create those touches. Again, when Deshaun Watson comes back, I'm hoping we can see more from Njoku. Incredibly inspiring from him. You obviously made the reveal.
Oh, yeah. I forgot that happened.
The burns were far more extensive than anyone thought. Njoku's reaction was basically, "I'm just grateful I didn't lose my eyes," and then went on a very weird side rant thing about how ultimately he thought it was kind of cool. The adrenaline pump and all that. I'm just like, all right, psychopath, let's keep it on the field. So
I had a very fun conversation, a very good conversation about fire safety with my son after showing him David's picture. So thank you, David, for that.
But the ability for him to sort of do what he's doing is, he made it a point after Jarvis Landry left. He wanted to make that his goal, to be that guy. And I think the things he's doing are making that happen. It's unbelievable. Having seen what he went through to play 2 days later in that incredibly hot sun with the wrap and everything else, just putting a helmet on, that had to be awful. But again, inspirational leader in terms of that regard. I think that did have an impact. I think it's having an impact. It's really tough to come up with excuses not to do your job when you have a guy who's on the field and literally his face is gone.
Yeah.
But shout out to Njoku. Again, I hope we can get more of that going. Now, there were some areas where beyond the jet sweep to Elijah Moore where I was, let's say, nonplussed by Kevin Stefanski and the coaching staff. I think it was in the fourth quarter, the punt timeout fiasco. I hated this. I hated this scenario. I hate any time you use a timeout and don't go for it, because at that point it's just a waste, because you could, and they did. This is the part that makes it worse for me, is you can take the delay of game and punt. They did take the delay of game and punt, but they used the timeout. Now, ultimately it didn't matter, but it was just a very clunky operation. They wanted to set up that look with Harrison Bryant. It's fine. I think they forced it in a situation they didn't need to. Save it for another game, whatever. I get it. Even the down and distance made sense. I think the Browns, when it initially happened, I was sort of like, I probably wouldn't go for this either. I was thinking in my head, I would probably punt. And then afterwards, I was immediately kicking myself, thinking they should have gone for it, because just in a vacuum, you're sort of looking at this and go, your defense is playing really well. Take your shot and hope they make a mistake, or you just make a play, which they had done.
Yeah, I wanted them to go for it. I was mad they didn't.
So
that's probably unpopular.
I mean, I think there were people who thought they should go for it. Again, this is a great defense, and you're sitting there looking at all these options. Again, in the moment, I was sitting there going, I don't know if I trust this offense to get this yard in this situation. But like just evaluating that from the standpoint of like, how would I want to operate the game? Like, I think I'd rather take that shot and live with the consequences as opposed to force myself into another situation. And Greg Olson's a very big proponent of going for it on fourth down. And he did it. He talked about that in this game because ultimately the Browns then had to go and make a 4th and 4, which they did convert. But like you had an opportunity to go forth on, I think it was basically a yard, or maybe a yard and a half. And then you had put yourself in a situation you had to convert 4th and 4. So like, it's a reminder to trust myself and always just go for it. The other part that got a lot of criticism where I will defend the coaching staff is PJ Walker down by the goal line, rolling out and then throwing the ball. The entire defense is expecting Jerome Ford or Kareem Hunt or whatever to get the ball and run it. So you are incentivized to then have some sort of rollout to get PJ Walker, who's a decent athlete, outside. Now, you could just block this and make this as a designed run, but the reason you call this a pass is to try to get guys out of your way. You want to get defenders moving away from that side of the field to create more space. He was according to Kevin Stefanski, and I don't doubt him, he was told not to throw it at all. I would have thought that they would have told PJ Walker, you basically play this like basketball, where if it's not wide open, you just take it to the hoop, or in this case, stay in bounds and go down. Just whatever you do, protect the football and go down in bounds. He forced the ball, had no business forcing. I love that play call because that stuff works. And you get, and the Browns had done this. The 49ers had done this. Both teams have gotten 4th downs or critical situations picked up because they were willing to sort of force the defense to be honest to the interior and then went outside. I have no problem with that. Walker, in his own presser, sort of admitted he was completely wrong, shouldn't have done it. Immediately apologized or whatever. But that was one of those things where like, don't tell me that a 28-year-old quarterback who's a grown-ass man and has started games in the NFL cannot do this. That it's like putting faith in somebody like he's a child. And like you do this type of stuff at all kinds of levels of the game. Like this isn't something where like you have to save this for the NFL. You see this all over the place. So like the idea that you're criticizing the coach for taking that type of what should be a very safe opportunity to try to put stress on the defense, I have absolutely no problem with that. Fortunately, it did not burn them.
Yeah, listen, that, first of all, that was an extremely stressful drive. You didn't let me finish my text thread, but Pete texted me and said this drive is taking years off of my life. And yes, we all felt this way. It was the hold your breath, heart pounding, like every single play was meaningful. And I got Maddox to watch the game with me at the end. Like, so he's a busybody. So like most of the football game, it's like he's constantly doing something. So like in the entire third quarter, which is helpful for me, helpful for me because it distracts me a little bit from being so uber focused on like being stressed out about it. So we were playing this game. I was throwing the ball and he was defending it. So that was like the whole third quarter. And then I think I injured my shoulder. I might be questionable for next week's game with Maddox. My shoulder is sore from throwing. So anyway, he sat with me for the final 4th quarter and started to get really into it. So on that final drive, when PJ, after Jerome Ford had made the run, and it's like I'm saying to him, I'm like, we want to score a touchdown, and he was like counting the points, and he was like, well, that would make the score this, and he was like, what if they don't score a touchdown? I'm like, well, then they're gonna go for a field goal, and he was like, that's 3, and so he was like doing the math. And anyway, so PJ Walker goes for that play specifically. And he was like, this is like really the first that he's like really yelled at the TV and or a player. And Maddox was like, why didn't he just run the ball? He could have just ran the ball. What was he doing? I was like, all right. I was like, yes, correct. Like that is the correct reaction. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy that in the press conference he admitted to like that was on him, because I think Kevin Stefanski was taking a lot of heat for his play calling in that particular situation. And I think I had texted you, Pete, too. I believe at that point they only took 12 seconds off the clock. It was, I think, a minute 55 when they were at the like 12-yard line, and then it was 1:43 when they kicked the field goal.
Yeah, the incompletion hurt.
Yeah, it killed them. And the fact that then San Francisco had to keep a timeout because the clock stopped. So, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, you're only up by 2. All San Fran has to do is get in field goal range. And, in the NFL these days, you can kick a 60-yarder and still have a shot at it going in. There was just way too much time left for me to be comfortable. And again, that was like the longest 1 minute and 40 seconds of my entire life that we've witnessed. And I know we haven't really talked about the defense much. I mean, we've talked a little bit here and there. The defense, for me, that was frustrating. They actually did great up until MJ Emerson got the penalty, which was huge because it gave them a new set of downs, and then they made some completions and they were able to continue moving the ball down the field. I hate even saying this, and I'll give credit to Brock Purdy and the 49ers. I mean, they were running a hurry up offense, and they were quick. He made the right reads. He got the ball out of his hands because with the entire game, he was being pressured and he was having to make quick decisions. But he did a really nice job of making the right reads. The defensive line almost felt non-existent. I mean, it was amazing to me that they couldn't get the pressure that they had been getting all game. And I was sitting there thinking, like, this is so frustrating because the defense has played so well, particularly the defensive line. And it just felt like they weren't able to do anything. Like, I wanted a sack or like something negative, something to just get in his mind again and just stop them from getting those like little chunk plays. So that for me was, it was, I felt like I was slowly losing faith, like every single snap of like, it's over. I mean, it felt like we were setting up for a heartbreaker.
Yeah. So the defense, first drive and last drive were their worst two. They got destroyed on the first drive. And in the last drive, they weren't very good. After that penalty, the penalty sort of set the tone. And it was frustrating. They were playing straight man pretty much. Maybe they mixed in the zone here or there, but it really felt like they were just playing man. And they were able to find open guys by the sideline and get yards after the catch. And the one play where Ayuk caught the ball in the middle of the field, it looked like the Browns, in some respects, almost like, I don't want to say gave up, but were just so dejected that they stopped chasing him.
Yeah.
Really disheartening in the moment. Now they ultimately got him down, but like, Brock Purdy is a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback, but he's a good quarterback. Maybe he can be great, but the things he does well, and they touched on this in the broadcast, as Kevin Stefanski pointed out, like he processes at a very, very high level. I believe Kevin Stefanski said he's an elite processor. And just gets the ball out on time and does those things, which he's right when he says those are really, really important elements to playing quarterback. Brock Purdy is not great in terms of arm strength. He's not great in terms of accuracy. He certainly has his moments. He's not great in the rain, as we found out.
Yeah.
But he also doesn't make a whole lot of like egregious mistakes either.
Right.
He doesn't take bad sacks, and he doesn't tend to, when he throws the ball inaccurately, it doesn't tend to get him beat. In this case, like he threw the interception he threw to Martin Emerson was the first of his for the season. Like Martin Emerson's first of his career, but Brock Purdy is in game 5 and threw his first pick, or game 6 for them, first pick of the year. Like that's how cautious he's been with the football. And he has to be when they aren't rolling and they're missing guys like Christian McCaffrey who went out and Deebo Samuel who went out. Trent Williams, was hurt but played. They don't have a lot of room for error. And, that drive was, I mean, I guess in some ways you could be like, well, the Browns defense at some point it was going to break the dam, like just the amount of time they'd be going. But still, like we said, if that had lost the game, I think it would have had people asking a lot of questions. Now, ultimately, the onus of this game was still on the offense. It's still on turnovers. They lost another game in terms of the turnover battle. They're now -8 on the season, which is horrendous.
Right.
There are a lot of things and the penalties and all those other things. Like these are all the things you can point at and go, this is how you lose football games. You give credit for the Browns to endure, but obviously in this scenario, the 49ers had multiple opportunities to win the game and couldn't do the job. So there were a lot of good things I saw on defense, as much as I'm sort of hard, like it very easy because of the stakes in that drive and the first drive. You can sort of look at it's very, very easy to pick on the defense. Here's what I will say. Dalvin Tomlinson had his best game as a Brown. Dalvin Tomlinson was really good. Now, some of that is because the 49ers are not good on the offensive line. Anyone not named Trent Williams. But Dalvin Tomlinson was impactful. Jordan Elliott had his best game as a Brown, and that's where I have even more questions about the 49ers offensive line because Jordan Elliott just generally doesn't do that. But all the credit in the world to him, he got a lot of pressure. They did a really good job on the inside. What was difficult for the Browns is they had a really difficult time getting pressure on the tackles. Now Trent Williams is a Hall of Famer. Trent Williams is phenomenal. I've never seen, and maybe it's happened before, Myles Garrett threw him. I've never seen Trent Williams go down like that. I'd be very curious to know if anyone has ever done that to him. Threw him down on one particular play and was able to get some pressure. But like overall, they did some really good things to sort of protect Purdy. And Purdy, like I mentioned already, played really smart and didn't do a lot of dumb things. That's half the battle. The other player I would point out who played really, really well, I thought this was his best game as a Brown, is Obo Okoronkwo. The first couple of games of this year, I was really just irritated by his instinct on some of the things he was trying to do. He was squeezing plays where it seemed like he should have stayed out wide and just doing things where it seemed like he's backwards. Like it seems like he's starting to figure out his feel for how the rest of this defense plays, including so that there's a marriage between the Browns defensive line and their linebackers. The linebackers are basically tasked with fixing whatever the defensive line does because the defensive line has a ton of freedom. But what I saw in this game was Obo Okoronkwo like making the right choices consistently and making a lot of plays that aren't necessarily sacks or anything else, but were just monster plays that just impacted the game and had a huge just overall benefit to the Browns on that. So I was really happy to see that they're starting to get more contributions. And like we talked about during the bye week, I firmly believe this defense can still get better. And these are some of the guys I thought can play better. Certainly Dalvin Tomlinson is a guy where, he's making $14 million. So there's a lot that comes with that. I thought if he can continue to play like that, the games where Myles Garrett isn't going against all of it. And the other thing I'd point out with Myles Garrett is it's very easy for people to go, well, they should move Myles Garrett away from Trent Williams to give him a better matchup. But part of the reason you don't do that is because then the 49ers just run the ball behind Trent Williams against whoever else is there and just roll him over. So I've already seen it. People are complaining about Myles Garrett's impact in this game. I think he played the run way better than I've seen him play this season. He did a lot of good things. And Greg Olsen, who's really, really good, pointed out that Myles Garrett got beat on a couple plays early in the game on that first drive. Like they did some things to exploit him. And there's some things that Myles Garrett has a habit of doing that allow him to get beat at times. Like he wants to get up the field. That can open him up to some things. I thought, and as Greg Olsen pointed out, but just watching, you saw him sort of adjust and change how he's playing it to cause more problems, stay gap sound, and try to play more of a power game to be sound against the run. And it made a really big difference. I think you saw far more of a true team effort on defense in this game as opposed to in games past, and this is certainly not a knock, where the Browns were just so good that individual players would just do shit and it would work because they were just so overpowering. But like in this game, I think it set other guys up to make plays. JOK's sack, the other sack that they had, which I don't think they've actually given out credit for. I think Sione Taki got credit for a sack. Like they played really good team defense. I was really happy to see that against this team because the 49ers force you to play it because they are really good at finding whatever your weakness is. We saw this with the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys safeties, not very good. 49ers eviscerated them for 4 quarters. The Browns showed that again, injuries play a role. Browns showed they could hold up and that they didn't have a place where you could just endlessly pick them apart, which is like a huge credit to them and what they have with this group.
I would say it's probably really important to point out what you said, though, the team effort overall. It wasn't a bunch of talented individuals. making plays. Like they did truly feel like a team. And that's something that I don't think that we've really acknowledged at this point in time, especially with just I think everything that happened over the last week. I mean, the Browns were obviously major underdogs, and they continued to be even more and more an underdog as the week played out and as the starting quarterback was announced. Like, that is the harsh reality. And everyone, including fans, counted the Browns out. It almost felt like we were saying, like, just wave the white flag. You don't have Deshaun Watson starting, like, wave the white flag. Why are you starting Myles Garrett? Why are you starting the defensive starters? Like, why risk another injury? Just pack this one up and, like, see you, Colts. We'll see you we'll see you next week. Like, we'll just count this as a loss going in. And I'm happy that this team responded in a way that was like, no, we still have a football game to go play. Like, why not win? Why not, like, give it our, like, who knows what can happen? And we've said this before. The Nick Chubb injury was terrible. Steelers didn't feel bad for us.
No.
The Ravens. Deshaun Watson is announced that he's not playing at 10:30. The Ravens didn't care. Do you think I give two shits that Deebo Samuel goes out early, that Trent Williams is limping off, that Christian McCaffrey's nursing a hamstring? I don't feel bad. I'm done feeling bad for other teams. Like, this stuff happens to the Browns all the time. For once, we got to be a team. The defense got to be a team that was like, go beat us with what you have. And they couldn't.
Yeah. And you sort of touched on this when we were texting back and forth. Like, this game meant a lot because what was sort of using the narrative, but let's just say the theme of the week was sort of just the Browns managing bad messaging and sort of trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube relative to Deshaun Watson's shoulder situation.
I've never heard that saying before.
Really?
No.
Huh. Anyway, like, that was the whole.
That's actually a great way to describe it, though.
That was just so much this week felt like it was about winning a PR battle they had already lost. And I'm not saying the Browns tried to win this, but it felt like fans and media were mad at them that they weren't trying to win this.
You're correct.
In some ways. And like, they were really mad. Like, so here's my theory on what happened with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson has played through everything in his whole life through this point. Like, he's, other than the ACL tears he suffered, he's played through everything. And I have very little doubt that when he hurt his shoulder and won, that he basically said, I'll be fine Sunday. Plan on it. And the Browns did. And that's not to say DTR did not get reps. He got a ton of reps. But when push came to shove and it's Sunday and the Browns are sitting there going, well, we're still planning on going with Watson, and Watson couldn't go. Then ultimately they go, DTR, you're the starter, which is what I found really interesting about that part is that PJ Walker talked about his last start happened the exact same way, where he was told the morning of, like right after the other quarterback tried and could not go, that he was told he was going to start, and that was the deal. So Deshaun Watson finds out the hard way he can't play. So what happens? As is the case, you suddenly realize, oh crap, I'm actually hurt. I can't just muscle that way through this. And ultimately now you have to actually listen and do what you're supposed to. And that's where you get into the situation where I think Deshaun Watson had to be honest with himself more, be honest with the medical staff more. And this is not a knock on Deshaun Watson. This is competitors competing. This is what they do. And you'll find this at all levels where you will have players say, no, I'm playing, I'll be fine. And they try and they can't. And I think you ran into that with this. That is, to me, the Occam's razor simplest explanation to what happened. Does that make it look any less awkward and potentially bad from the Browns standpoint that Deshaun Watson goes from not playing against the Ravens to then missing a total of 3 weeks for this injury? No. Nor does it change the pressure that's now on Deshaun Watson to perform. But I do think that's the most reasonable way to look at what happened. And ultimately, I think in some ways, the Browns winning this game increases the pressure on Deshaun Watson as much as it should sort of dissipate some of the pressure. Because in some ways you're sitting there going, well, they're 3-2. I guess you get a little more breathing room. But I think, heading into the next week against the Colts, if he's playing, like, there's an expectation that you got to go out and win. you got to beat the Colts because one, they are beat up. They're going to have a backup quarterback in Gardner Minshew, and the Browns should. It stands to reason they should be much better with Deshaun Watson than they were with PJ Walker. So it's an interesting situation. I think too much has been made of it. Injuries are weird. It's not as a situation where it was like discipline or a suspension or something else. Again, I think the Browns did not handle it particularly well in terms of communications, but nevertheless, I don't think it's the big deal. And I do think this win eliminates all of that nonsense and just allows them to focus, because what is the natural extension of the Deshaun Watson mishap is everybody now assumes that there is disarray in the locker room, that people don't, the players are mad, the players don't get along, the players don't believe in the coaching staff, and people will run with anything, especially in Cleveland, but for any NFL fan base without a ton of credibility, and the Browns don't have it, is that they will then jump to every insane conclusion they have to assume the worst. The reality is it's never as bad, nor is it as good as we would like to believe. The truth is almost always somewhere in the middle. So I suspect that the Browns are not immediately fixed by this, but I do think the situation winning helps. I do think the situation is not as bad as people want it to be as far with Watson, or not want it to be, but think it is. There may have been some small amount of dissension among players, but I do think ultimately they rallied, got on the same page, and they showed a lot of grit and pride, which Jim Schwartz talked about in his press conference this week. And they ultimately were able to come together for the goal of winning this game. And, massive win, easily the biggest upset of this week, potentially this season.
Yeah. Well, we talk about body language, emotion. We like to analyze all of these things when it comes to players. And I know that we were texting back and forth after the game, the emotion of when Moody missed the field goal. Like Amari Cooper, who is pretty similar in terms of personality to Nick Chubb, like pretty level-headed, pretty even-keeled. I've never seen him embrace anyone like he embraced David Bell, to the point of like people were like,
fourth down hero, David Bell. Yes.
I forgot David Bell was on the team. But yeah, like just the raw emotion was so exciting to see. And to me, just said how much like this really meant to them as a team overall. Again, no one expected them to win. They had to hear about it all week. The underdogs, like everyone arguing about Deshaun Watson. There was a lot of concerns. Is this team, like, is the locker room dividing? Again, like coming off of the bye week, especially. So I just love seeing that. Like I feel like obviously like overcoming adversity is something that you can build upon. It means a lot. Like to be able to go through this so early on in the season and come out with a victory. And the hope is that Deshaun is better and able to come back. I agree with you. I think this actually adds pressure to him because they win this football game that they're not supposed to win. And there are going to be some favorable matchups coming up that the Browns absolutely should win. And, we have to hope that the defense can continue this tear and that the offense kind of gets back to what we saw against the Titans and you continue to build on that. And the run game again continues to get better and things are figured out. But yeah, Pete, I like where we are. I like where this team is. And I think there's just so many things to build on and look forward to as we move forward. And I'm just so happy it went this way. I mean, it's such a relief.
Well, we talked in the bye week about guys were pressing. I think for the offense to win this game in the way that they did, look, PJ Walker's not the quarterback of this team. Like he was the quarterback today. But I do think that was a huge relief for the offense as a collective. I think that's part of what I've never seen Amari Cooper emote like that ever. I think that was part of why that was so big for those guys. Because, and obviously Amari Cooper's been playing well all season. Like he's just been a good football player. There are other guys who have not played as well, and you're sort of waiting for them to step up in a big way. But I do think this is a confidence boost for those guys. I do think that there's an element of we don't have to make hero plays. We just have to do our job. We just have to execute what's there. And if we do those things, ultimately we're going to be in a position to win and come out with the victory like they did this game. And I'm hoping, we'll see, that when they play the Colts, that there is a feeling of letting the game play out as opposed to feeling like they have to try to make everything happen. And obviously that starts with Deshaun Watson. He has to embrace that mindset, but like not trying to run backwards on jet sweeps, not trying to run backwards on handoffs, not trying to make plays that aren't there. Just do your job and ultimately trust the coaching staff and each other, and ultimately things will work out. Because like this is a perfect example. David Bell, 4th and 4, he makes that catch. There are any number of people who have criticized whether David Bell should be on his team. And I will tell you, coaches love David Bell because David Bell does one thing. He goes and does his job every time. He's not a great player. He's not a great athlete, but he does his job. So on 4th and 4, he goes out there, gets behind the sticks, sets up, gets the first down. That's it. And you will take guys like that because of that element. And I think as much as like you don't want to sit, like I think there's something to be learned from that in David Bell got 2 targets in this game. One was out of his reach and the other one was the catch. But like just get in there and do your job. The other element that obviously came up big in this game was special teams. Now we are in game 5 and we now have to take an L on the field goal kicking conversation. You can finally say to us that yes, kicking made a big difference. And kicking ultimately won the game. The Browns made more of their field goals than the 49ers did. Now, having said that, what is my feeling both watching the game live and talking to Bree after the fact? We're both mad they didn't score touchdowns when they had the opportunity. Like ultimately, that's still where we're at. But you're right. For people who complain, this is the game where you can point to and go, yes, this was awesome that Dustin Hopkins came up big in big moments. And that the trade has been really, really good so far for this team. The other element of that is that Corey Bojorquez had a phenomenal game. Corey Bojorquez, not a great punter, he's just inconsistent. Occasionally will have an absolute boomstick like he did a couple times in this game, and there are other times he just shanks the ball. One key punt he had that was massive was the punt right before the half. There were like 25 seconds left when the 49ers got the ball, and he kicked like a 69-yard punt. Flipped the field and just put it in a position where the 49ers basically gave up and said, okay, we're going to the half. Those are the type of plays you look at that.
Yeah.
And you go, very happy to see that. It was interesting because they called up Jalen Darden because Cedric Tillman is hurt. And Jalen Darden was in there for both kickoff and punt. Although he wasn't in all the punts, there were some David Don Peoples-Jones was in for. Nevertheless, it certainly wasn't great, but it was more positive than it has been. I think both Darden was more positive, and I think DBJ was a little bit better than he has been. So you got a little bit more impact from that standpoint. I think the coverage units were good in this game. You didn't get anything hugely excited out of the special teams. It's another situation where they just largely held serve in a way that, again, allows you to win the game. So what makes that interesting to me is one of the comparisons I had for this game and thinking about it was this game was akin to when Eric Mangini led the oldest Browns defense in the history of football in 2010 with Colt McCoy at quarterback and beat the New Orleans Saints with just absolute nonsense, including multiple defensive touchdowns. Gray-haired David Boeing getting, I think, a pick 6 in that game, and like any number of weird things happened to ultimately win the game. What makes that funny is Bubba Ventrone mentioned that game in his press conference.
He did.
Because he played in it. He was in that game.
Amazing.
So it just had a weird parallel to just their mindset and sort of what they, believed was possible. And I think in some ways you looked at this game and you were like, you listen to press conferences all week and you hear Myles Garrett and these other guys go, we believe in whoever's quarterbacking this team. You're like, all right, yeah, sure you do. We'll see what happens on Sunday. And even that, even if you were skeptical initially, ultimately they did. They were true to their word. I was really happy with a lot of things I heard. I think the thing I was really the happiest to see, other than Amari Cooper emote, and just the joy for him.
Amari Cooper emote.
Yes, was Juan Thornhill in the best way, shit talking fans. It was awesome.
I don't know that I caught this. I think you might have sent me something, but my phone wasn't loading at my parents' house. So I don't think that I saw it. So fill me in on this. So
Juan Thornhill, who we talked about all offseason because he's Mr. Incessant Positivity, and he got fans and media got mad at him for basically saying, no, we're going to win. And he's just like, this is how I am. This is who I am. And today after the game, he goes something along the lines of, players will tell you they don't look at social media. I look at all of it. And I was pissed that all these fans and media had written us off. And I was like, like even coming, this was like at his locker, like coming off the field, he had this whole big rant about, you believe in us now and all this, like, and the only reason I love this is because I believe it's 100% genuine with Juan Thornhill, because it's been who he's been since he signed here. And I like the fact that they have that guy who's doing that type of thing and being able to do that because he's been consistent. It's very easy to do that when things are going well. And, like when he signed, it was Mr. Hype Man. And then when we get into the season, sort of back away from it when things aren't going well. I love the fact that Juan Thornhill is willing to take that on. And I say, when I say shit talking fans, I mean this in like the kindest ways, basically saying, because we didn't. I'm telling you, I didn't believe this team.
No one did.
I know at least 3 people who sold their tickets for this game because of what they thought was going to happen in this.
Are you implying me?
No, actually, you had a legitimate reason why you could go.
I did. And actually I felt terrible because I sold them 2 weeks ago, going into the bye before it was even announced. And I'm traveling tomorrow for work, which is why you guys get this episode even sooner. So you're welcome. And I just knew that I couldn't swing, like being gone all day and then having to pack, get ready, etc. Going into work day. But when Deshaun Watson was announced as not playing, I felt terrible. And then like the weather looked really crappy. And I was like, oh gosh, I feel so bad for the guy that bought my tickets. But it sounded like there were a lot of 49ers fans there, which actually made me like quite happy that they witnessed a heartbreaking loss and they saw it in Cleveland. So that was fun.
And like part of me is happy about this because the conversation we had last week, again, I get it. There's a lot of money in tickets and stuff. And you, when you pay that much and the team sucks or doesn't do what you hope they do, like I get you're frustrated and the feeling is to boo. But like, this is why I applaud guys for like Juan Thornhill being like, come on, man, just get on board, take a chance with this and see what happens. And there are any number of cynical fans who are going to be like, whatever. But ultimately, you're still paying the money and like you're still going. So you might as well.
And here's the other thing, too. It's hilarious that we want to get mad at the football players for believing in themselves to win football games, as if they did the opposite, we'd be so mad that they didn't believe in themselves and that like you just remember all the teams that we had to watch where they gave half effort, 50% effort. And now you have guys that not only give maximum effort, but they also believe in themselves and what they do and what they are as a team. That is something that we haven't really experienced. So it's just funny to me how like we're going to get mad at the players that have this belief.
Yeah, like I want more guys to believe in what the Browns have. And I think that is
it seems sincere too. Like it doesn't just seem like fluff, you know?
Particularly with Thornhill, yes.
Yeah.
But I just think in general, like you get into this whole conversation, like I haven't seen too much of this, but people keep telling me that like there are fans who are literally trying to take this win away from Kevin Stefanski for any number of stupid reasons. I don't know what else he has to do to get people to believe that, yes, he's not super Mr. Emotional speech, fiery guy, whatever. Although he did yell at one referee, which caught a lot of attention today when he got that crap pass interference call on Grant Delpit, which was just amid a whole bunch of bad officiating. And yes, the head-to-head contact was poorly called. I'm not going to apologize or give the win back. I'll just say it was a bad call. But like, they need to have the Browns clearly have assembled a group of players that believe in themselves and believe in what this team is doing to the point they're willing to put out as much as they are on the field. If you insist on saying Kevin Stefanski doesn't deserve credit for it, I feel sorry for you because like you're missing out on something because clearly guys respect the way he treats them, respond to the way he treats them. He doesn't have to rah and all this other crap. His post-game speeches are always weird and funny in some ways, but like players are all about it. They believe in it because part of it is he cares about them and they know that. And I think that is something that works for him and works for this team. So like, and if we come out next week and we're talking about how the Browns got just dumped a bad game to the Colts, it may mean very little, but I think if the Browns can use this a launching pad and beat the Colts next week. And then they play the Seahawks in Seattle. We'll see how that goes. I do think that like this becomes one of those things where like this can be one of those moments where they can look and go, this is earned confidence, which is we talked about in the offseason. The Browns desperately need earned confidence. And like this is a major pelt to put on your wall. This is a huge trophy for you. You beat the NFC favorite for the Super Bowl in a game where you had your QB 2 or 3, depending on how you want to count it. I don't really care. Back second team left guard, second team right tackle, second team and third team. God only knows what you count Kareem Hunt running back. Like, and you made it work. You made it happen. Like those are the type of wins where you look at, you go and you go, no, we can do this. And there's going to be a situation where there's going to be a game at some point this year. And I think this is going to be something that becomes a source of strength for them and allows them to respond and hopefully win again. This is the things you want to see. Like I'm not afraid. And I've said this on the podcast often. I desperately want this to work for Kevin Stefanski. I really think he's a good coach. And these are the type of wins. And I've said this on the podcast, like with all the stuff that's going on wrong on offense, if it's Kevin Stefanski's opportunity to prove himself that he's a good coach by making this work. This was a monster step in that direction. And no, it was not pretty. This was a horribly ugly offensive performance. And I don't care because it ends with W. And that's all I want. I just want W's. And the Browns are 3-2. I thought even healthy, fully healthy with Nick Chubb, Jack Conklin, Deshaun Watson playing whatever he was going to play at whatever level, that the Browns could end up being 2-3 at this point, and then they were going to have to rally. They are 3-2 with this garbage barge of talent they have on offense that they sort of have to figure this thing out. And like, I feel very good about their ability to do it because of all the things we saw them do in the this bye week, all the changes they made that we thought they needed to make, and just the things that are headed in a better direction. It's got to continue that way, but I like the direction, I like the feeling of this team in this moment. I like the fact that it erases so much of the nonsense we've listened to for the last 2 weeks, hopefully, and they can just focus on the Colts and focus on trying to be 4-2 or 4-2 at that point, and right in there in the divisional race.
Yeah, this is a great position to be in, and I can't believe it's taken me this long to say this, Pete. Today was my dad's 70th birthday, and
happy
my
birthday.
dad. Yes, happy birthday, Father. The most pessimistic or one of the most pessimistic Browns fans I have ever met in my entire life. So it seems fitting that they would pull up this upset on his birthday. I just have to say that.
So what was his reaction of being having lived this long, of being pessimistic and have it happen on his birthday?
Okay, so the reaction was, so actually let me find it because he texted our group chat this morning. And he said, well, he's not a big Kevin Stefanski fan. He doesn't like his coaching decisions. He doesn't really pick apart the play calling. It's like the decision making, the timeouts, etc. He gets mad at him about. So his text came today at 12:30. I will feel better about the Browns if they can hold the 49ers to 3 scores. I'm not going to count any score if our offense turns the ball over inside our 50-yard line. I'd also like them to have 40 yards of rushing at halftime. It's going to be interesting to see if we throw quick passes, 3-step or 5-step drops. It would be just like Stefanski to have an inexperienced quarterback sit in the pocket for 4 seconds. So that was my dad going into the game. Okay.
So based on his challenge, but just let's stop here. His challenge is 40 yards rushing at the half. They
yes.
did that. Held them under 3 scores. That did not result from turnovers. They did that.
Correct.
What was the other one?
He said
quick passes. They did that.
He said quick passes. They
did that.
Not letting PJ sit in the pocket for 4 seconds.
Okay, they were 3 for 3 on things your dad wanted. Now, does this become a Grinch situation where his heart grows as 3 sizes by the end of this game?
So then my mom responds and said, don't be a pessimist before the game starts, because I had said you might have to turn off at halftime. So like I actually was feeding into the pessimism.
Sure.
Okay. So then my dad said, I actually bet the Browns' first drive to be an interception. So he won that bet on his birthday. So like, let's just say he's getting rewarded for his pessimism. Wow. My mother bets the 49ers to win the game because we've talked about this, Pete. She's going on if she bets against the Browns, then she thinks they're going to win. So like my mom is playing the mind trick conspiracy theory route of gambling. So then, the gameplay, we're in a group chat and my brother-in-law is saying all kinds of swear words that I've never heard before. So the other funny story about this is we had debated going to this game as a family for my dad's 70th birthday. Like, let's go to the game together, let's celebrate, etc. We decided to go to the Tennessee game instead, which ended up obviously being also a really fun game because they won. And so as soon as the Browns won, my dad texted us and said, I knew we should have went to the game, with a smiley face. And I said, you would have left early, Dad. Let's be real. So anyway, that was how it all played out. So he was happy. He still had his own complaints, but I would expect nothing less.
Well, again, I'm happy he got the all three of those things he wanted from the Browns, and a victory, and he got to celebrate his birthday, and hopefully his expected age did not drop as a result of the stress induced by the end of that game, because that was.
I think my mother was at risk for like, my mother is very much like me, where it's a nervous, like, standing and pacing panic. And I actually tried to stand up and pace, and my husband made me sit back down because I was sitting for the game. And he was like, if you stand up now and things go bad like that, it's on you. And I was like, you're right, I have to sit back down. So me and Maddox took position on the couch, and I posted the video of Maddox's reaction because he was hyped when the Browns kicked the field goal, and then when Moody missed the field goal. You got to love the innocence of children, right? Because he obviously has not been
beaten down by life.
Exactly. Beaten down by life, or just being a Browns fan in general. And so, we're sitting watching that drive transpire, and the 49ers just keep moving the ball on the field. And he was like, Mommy, he was like, what's happening? Why are you so mad? And I said, well, all they have to do is kick a field goal, Maddox. Like, they don't have to get a touchdown. And so they're already pretty close to being in field goal range. He said, what does that mean? And I said, they're going to try to get as close as they possibly can. And then they're going to kick a field goal, and there's not going to be any time left for the Browns. And he was like, oh. He was like, so there's like not going to be, he was like, if they kick the field goal, like what, like if they make it, what happens? And I said, it's over. And he said, well, what if he misses? I said, the Browns win. He was like, oh, they go to line up the kick and they freaking miss. And I was like, I didn't even think that it was like a possibility that he was going to miss the field goal. And my son is here innocently, like, weighing out all the options of, like, they could still miss and the Browns could win. So yeah, he was pretty pumped to go through all of the scenarios of how the ending of the game was going to be, and then to actually see the Browns win. And then I stopped the video before he got into all of his shit talking, because there was plenty of that after.
I'd expect nothing less.
Just fully like, yeah, the Browns win, the Browns are the best. Because he knew, he said to me, he was like, this team, he said, they're 5-0, the 49ers. He said, so they're good. And I said, yeah. He goes, they're the best in the league right now. I said, yeah. I said, they probably are the best football team in the league. And, so like, little boy logic is the Browns win. He's like, so are the Browns like the best in the league now, Mom? He goes, the Browns are the best. They beat the best team. And I'm like,
the boxing mentality. Let's go.
Whatever you want to think. Yeah, sure. They're the best team in the league right now. Like, yep, go to school tomorrow and brag.
Well, as Myles Garrett said, you want to be the best, you got to beat the best.
That's right. And they did.
So yeah, I mean, what else can you say at that point? The little kid logic works out here.
100%. It's like girl math.
Indeed. We'll end on that one. Awesome win. I don't know how you can feel anything else. You can nitpick if you want. I would have been happy with just a good effort losing. And I was all ready for a moral victory coming into this one. The fact that they won it, huge for this team, huge for this coach, huge for this organization as a whole, and huge for the fan base that desperately wants this team to work. And I think this game is evidence of nothing else, how bad this team wants to be good for themselves and for the city in general. They desperately want to make it work. So it's on them to carry it forward. We'll see if they can keep it going against the Colts. They've got a lot of winnable games in the near future, but they've got a lot of work to do. So should be fun. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm excited to just wake up tomorrow and not have to. There's no dread involved with this. That's always fun. I am excited for Ken Carman not having to take angry phone calls. I saw how relieved
That's right.
to see this. So that was awesome. So we'll go with that. Great win. Thanks for listening to everybody who's listening, the people who comment. like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we will see you next week.